Hi, I'm back here today with another video on Ray Kurzweil's new book. And this one is going to be even more mind-blowing than the first. Um, in this episode, part 2 here, we're going to talk about when it will be possible to make a one-to-one copy of yourself. So not just an avatar, but your actual body and brain. We're going to be talking about when the replicants are coming. So the replicants, the term is stolen from the film Blade Runner, but it's a term for, well, copies of people. And we're going to talk about if and when AI are going to become sentient and gain some form of consciousness. And finally, we're going to talk about zombies. Might zombies actually exist? So it's going to be pretty mind-blowing. And once again, Ray Kurzweil, if you don't know him, is a celebrated futurist. Many presidents have celebrated his knowledge and his predictions. So it is worth to listen to what he has to say. It doesn't mean that everything is going to come through, but it does mean that most of his predictions, or all of his predictions, are founded in math, so they're not just something crazy is pulling out of the hat. First, however, I want to do a little bit of a thought experiment. So if you use, for example, Siri, Alexa, ChatGPT, Gemini, some of all these tools, do you actually say, could you please? And do you say thank you? I know I do. And the question is, if you do, then why? Is it because somewhere you think that AI already at this point might have some feelings or some memory, and that it will actually treat you better if you're polite in this way? To provoke a little bit, you could say it's like the people who might believe in God, so at times they do pray. So I think there's a little bit of people actually starting to believe that there could be some form of consciousness in AIs already today. I don't know. Let me know in the comments. Anyway, if you do like this content, I'm going to produce more videos like this, so do remember to like and subscribe to the video. The big question is, how do we know if AI has become sentient? How do we actually know if AIs have developed some form of consciousness? How do we even know that a person next to us actually has consciousness, and that an AI does not? It's just something we assume, right? We assume that the friends we have, the people we meet, have some level of consciousness. Yet we can't really confirm it. Actually, we have trouble defining what does consciousness actually mean. So, for example, one way to define consciousness, according to Kurzweil, is the ability, the functional ability to be aware of your surroundings, and actually react on your surroundings. So that definition, the problem with that is, well, if you are sound asleep, don't you have consciousness then? If you're really drunk, as in the picture, do you have limited consciousness as compared to when you feel really fresh and are awake, where you would then have full consciousness? I think the challenge is here, can we really grade consciousness? If we define it like this, you can't say either something has consciousness or it doesn't. Actually, in this way, we have levels of consciousness. So that is kind of worth to think about, what does that mean for us? And will that mean that we could say an AI at some point would be partly conscious, would be partly sentient? Well, we don't know. Kurzweil is not clear on this either. Another way to describe or define consciousness is the ability to have a subjective experience inside your mind. So you don't just register what you're seeing, but you are seeing in your own unique way. You're having your own unique feelings and reactions to an experience. Again, people can act like they actually have, consciousness in this way. So could ChatGPT, for that matter. You could ask it how it has an experience with something, and it would give you an answer. So the challenge here is that even another person could say to you, I am having a subjective experience. You would then believe them because you yourself are able to have subjective experiences, but you can't actually measure whether another person has a subjective experience. So the problem here is, if we're defining consciousness by subjective experiences, we make the assumption that other people have subjective experiences, but we can't really measure it. Other studies on consciousness have looked at who actually has consciousness. I mean, if we start with humans, it seems there's a relationship to the complexity of our brain and whether or not we define that we would have consciousness. So the human brain is super complex. It has like 86 billion neurons compared to, for example, dogs and monkeys that have like a few billion neurons. A snake would have a lot fewer. And certain reptiles or insects would have like 1 million neurons, so a lot less than humans. But are they still conscious? Are they still having subjective experiences? Or do they just react on their instincts? Again, there seems to be evidence that animals do have a level of consciousness. Again, we cannot really measure it, so we can't be sure. And the whole reason Kurzweil is discussing this is, if we are not sure, then how can we actually define whether an AI starts to develop consciousness? But anyway, if we say, well, there's a connection between the complexity of our brains and our functional consciousness, then you could argue that the more and more complex we make AIs, and the time that they will actually be able to pass the Turing test, which means that we can't tell the difference between an AI and a human, then it would be easy to argue that they would have some form of functional consciousness. Again, with the subjective experiences, it would probably be harder because, again, the AI would definitely act like it is having subjective experiences, and it would try to give us evidence that would, I think, be part of the Turing test when you're discussing with the AI and trying to figure out, is this a human or is this an AI? So if we are satisfied with the evidence that an AI is giving us the feeling and the experience that they have subjective experiences, and we can see that it has consciousness in a functional way, so it's able to see what's going on. Like in that way, you could say an autonomous car, for example, does have some level of consciousness in that way, that it's understanding what's going on the road and is reacting to it. That said, I don't think this is what we as humans would perceive as consciousness, really. But that still leads us back to one of the points of Kurzweil. He's actually raising the question, do zombies exist? So he's defining a zombie as a human without subjective experience. So basically somebody going through life emotionally numb, so experiencing things and seeing things that goes on around it and does react to it, but does not have a subjective experience about what is really going on. So it's not like Kurzweil believes in zombies. I don't either, but he's just saying we can't actually prove that these zombies do not exist. We cannot prove that all humans actually have subjective experience. But going back to the AIs and you can picture this as maybe a humanoid robot, then at what level would you start to be careful? At what level would you treat it as if you believe it has consciousness? And here Kurzweil's point is that the safest moral choice is to assume that something, in this case an AI robot, would have some form of consciousness if we don't know. If we can see that it's acting to its surroundings, if it subjects, shows us that it has some form of subjective experience, at least so we think it's likely that it might have it, the safest moral choice would be to treat it with the respect that we would treat other beings that has actual consciousness. And I think we are seeing this, right? We are seeing how us humans, we would treat a cat or a dog with more respect and be much kinder to it, because we kind of think it has this subjective experience and it understands what's going on around us, it has memory, and it will get happy or sad depending on how we treat it, right? But a bug, most people will not treat with any sort of respect in that way, and they might just squash it as a result. So can we rule out that AI is able to have a subjective experience once it is passing the Turing test? Well, according to Kurzweil, we can't really rule that out. So you might have seen the film Ex Machina, where one of the main characters is a human-looking robot called Ava. And part of the film is actually testing if she can pass a form of Turing test, if she does have subjective experiences. And for the purpose of the film, it seems that she does. She talks about like what would her favorite place to be in the world, and she can describe that it would be in a place with a lot of people and a lot of traffic, and that is something she would like to experience. So again, an AI could express this without having the subjective experience, but just making us believe that it has it. But one thing I believe that the film proves, if you look at the points it's trying to convey, is that Ava has free will, because she has a very strong will to actually escape this kind of compound that she is living in, and seeing the real world. So what does free will really mean? Well, Kurzweil explains it that you are more than the program. So in human terms, what is the program? Well, the program, I suppose, is a mix of our genes, our upbringing, the impact from the outside world. So if we are just a program, well, then we would have no free will. We would not be able to make choices, because based on a certain stimulus from the outside world, like, would you like to eat this ice cream? Well, then we could actually not choose yes or no. It would all depend on our will strings that could be programmed into our genes. It could all be dependent on kind of our upbringing and history, whether we would say yes or no to the ice cream, thinking that potentially we do not want to eat it because it's not healthy. So maybe our choices are already made in this way, or maybe we actually stand in front of this decision having a real choice to say yes or no. I believe that most of us define being human is that we will actually have this choice, that we are more than the program, which is what we saw from the film Ex Machina, that Ava, she is more than just a program, and therefore it would make sense to treat her as though she is conscious. Obviously, Ex Machina and Ava is just fiction, but it kind of shows us the dilemma. It's also interesting to see that, well, for humans to gain sympathy for another being, it does not necessarily need to be another human. We see this with animals, we see this with fictional characters, where people can get a lot of affection towards somebody that's fictional, and even in the actual movie, it's not even a human. I think like Vision from the X-Men, Vision from the Avengers could be an example of that. That is like a humanoid robot that is a superhero, and people hope that this character will do well. I think it's the same again with Ex Machina, or even the Terminator movies. We see how quickly the Arnold Schwarzenegger character goes from being a villain Terminator to actually being a hero, and we start to root for that person. We want that person to win. We want that person to be happy. We get sad once the Terminator is terminated itself. So what's interesting about this is, even if we have trouble defining whether AI will gain consciousness and be sentient, we could easily be in a position in the 2030s where, when AI can pass the Turing test, that we will treat them with much more respect. Also because it's in our nature. Also because just, with ChatGPT, I'm already saying please and thank you, and I don't even know why. So if we had a being in front of us where we had doubt, where we actually say, well, this AI may be sentient, then I'm pretty sure that we would treat these entities with a lot of respect, and we would start seeing more and more people asking for human rights for AIs. Another interesting point, it's a little bit going down the rabbit hole of how we actually work as people, but Ray Kurzweil in his book also explains that in a human's head we have two parts of the brain, the left and the right part. I guess almost everybody knows this. What's a little more surprising is that each one can actually function individually. So Kurzweil is describing how a person, even though you take the part of the brain away that is mostly responsible for language, you can still relearn to speak with the other part of the brain. And also, it seems that the two parts of the brain can make individual decisions, but the other part is actually tricked and thinks that this part of the brain has made a decision that the other part of the brain has actually made. So again, this shows us about free will. Are we even aware of the decisions we're making it even more complex for us in the future to actually evaluate, did an AI take a conscious decision? Did it actually use free will, when we can't even decipher which part of our brain actually made a certain decision? All of this concludes in Kurzweil talking about making copies of people, right? So Kurzweil in his book talks about how we can kind of stop biological aging, and in that way live forever. But another way he's looking at kind of extending lifespan is to make copies of people, copies of brains. So, I mean, even if you can stop biological aging, you may still die from an accident, for example. Could you then have a backup? Is it possible to store all the information of a person and make a one-to-one copy of the brain? And this is actually why he spends so much time discussing the consciousness, right? Because he's saying, well, definitely we will be able to make one-to-one copies of the brain, and more or less one-to-one copies of the body, at least so it would function the way our bodies function. But the big question is it still you? Will you still have the same consciousness? Will it simply be a copy of you? Will it be a new consciousness, or will it be a you without the consciousness, without the subjective experience. And this remains one of the big question marks, and Kurzweil is also kind of throwing it up in the air, since we can't define consciousness. How do we even deal with this dilemma? What is more clear to Kurzweil is that we will have the ability to create these replicants. So if you watch Blade Runners, well, replicants are basically clone people. So not real people in that sense, but they do seem to have consciousness and subjective experiences like other people. But they are in essence copies of people. So what Kurzweil is saying, and this is one of his key predictions, that during the late 2020s, so probably around 2029, when he's also expecting AI to pass the Turing test, he is saying that we'll be able to create replicants in avatar form. So basically you could take a deceased family member, you could gather a lot of material like videos, drawings, photos, maybe a lot of texts that person has written. So this could be the messenger and the WhatsApp history. This could be basically everything that has gone up on social media, that you simply let an AI crawl through, and then you make this form of digital twin of another person. We can already do this now, but at this point it's pretty easy to tell that we are not actually chatting with the late person. You could probably hear it on the voice. Secondly, some of the person's answers would still be off versus what the real person would say. But when we get closer to 2020, it should be able to build avatars where you can't really distinguish where you are chatting with the real late person. So taking this one step further, 10 years later, he actually expects the replicants to be physical beings, so building human robots via nanotechnology, where it will be almost impossible to tell whether you're dealing with a real person or whether you're dealing with the replicant robot. So of course, the implications of this are profound. It could mean that if somebody dies in an accident, you could create a replicant. Let's say that the husband dies in a car crash or something like that. The wife could decide, I now want to make a replicant, and marry that replicant. If you're watching the series Black Mirror, you would actually see this example of a woman who's saddened by the loss of her young husband, and she is actually getting this robot. She's kind of ordering the replicant of the person. Again, I think it all comes down to the level of consciousness. She, in that series, feels a lack. She feels that, while this robot responds and feels like her husband in every way, it's still not him. So she's both repulsed and drawn to this robot replicant of her husband. So definitely it's a very complex thing to discuss and imagine, and it's very complex in terms of what about the legal rights of replicants when they're possible to make. When do they need rights? Do they need rights in avatar form, or first when they become physical? And if so, why would you need to be physical in order to actually have human rights? It is mind-blowing, crazy to think about. We don't know what of this will happen. What, in my own opinion, seems pretty realistic is that yes, we will make digital twins and avatar that are very close to ourselves, have the same capabilities. We can even superpower them to actually have more abilities than ourselves. And I do believe that these digital twins will be able to do a lot of the things that you're able to do. And so why do I think this is realistic? Well, because I'm already seeing it. I'm actually getting my own digital twin built, and I will show this digital twin in upcoming videos. And you can see it's not me, but you can see we are getting there. The answers from my digital twin is pretty similar to what I would answer to many questions, but you're not in doubt. You're not in doubt that you're not talking with me. But will we be able to create a copy of you in the future? I think yes, we will by the next 10 years be able to make these very true copies in terms of how you respond, how you look, how you react to certain things in avatar form. I think it's more speculative whether we'll be far enough ahead in nanotechnology to actually make human robots that you can't distinguish from robots in the late 2030s. I'm not sure this will be possible. I think this may be, it may take like another 10 years or maybe more, I don't know. And the big question is, what about the consciousness? Can we transfer it from the actual being, the actual person, to the copy? I think that's very speculative as well. So I think there's probably much more sense in looking at how can we change our biologies so we can extend our own lifespans instead of trying to make digital copies of ourselves as a substitution for ourselves. So that's just my opinion. But just wrapping up, so what Kurzweil is predicting here is in 2029 we will be able to make replicant avatars that seem as real as the real person. I think that will be true. As I said, I think we are already seeing the steps there. I don't think we need like extreme breakthroughs for that to happen. 10 years later, 2039, something like that, we will see the replicant nanobots. I'm much more skeptical that will actually be possible in only, say, 15 years. And again, in the 2040s, he says we can make a complete one-to-one copy of the brain. Again, I'm slightly more skeptical here, and I'm especially skeptical of whether you can actually transfer the consciousness, which just seems unclear, and I still think that is the key component. If we can't transfer the consciousness until this new body, we have not created any form of eternal life via that route. Anyway, whether you believe it or not, I think his predictions are very interesting and mind-blowing, and how exactly this plays out, we don't know, but the consequences for society will be tremendous. Anyway, if you like these videos, do give it a like, do subscribe to the channel, and I'll make more of these. We're only halfway into Ray's book, so I think I'll make at least like, 1 or 2 more videos on Ray Kurzweil's new book. Thank you.